Hi, this is Anya Fedish for Real Estate Talk, and I'm here today with Ross Levine, who is a real estate attorney in New York City. And just in those two sentences, I said everything which is super important, that you are a real estate attorney and that you are practicing in New York City. Because actually it's very common that somebody would tell me, I have this attorney that was handling my divorce and maybe he can help me with real estate as well. Or somebody is moving from California and wants to use the attorney from there. Why it's important to use a real estate attorney for real estate deals and also somebody who is practicing in New York City?
Great question, and we get that all the time. Hiring the cheapest attorney is not always the best move either.
Okay.
New York City, or really even New York State, but more specifically New York City, has its own rules. And it's very important that you hire someone who knows how to navigate through a lot of the different nuances. For instance, inspections. There is no inspection contingency like there is maybe in California or New Jersey. So before you sign the contract, all your due diligence that is conducted by my firm is done before you sign the contract. And that's very important to note, because a lot of buyers who come to speak with me and engage me are not aware that visiting the apartment, inspecting the apartment if they wish, understanding the contract itself is all done before you sign.
Okay. And then when is a good time that the buyer should contact you? Because first what they want to do, they want to see apartment, they want to put an offer, and then eventually find an attorney.
I think it's always best for my clients to contact me usually right before they make the offer.
Okay, and what is your role in putting an offer? Because usually it's my job, and I negotiate for them all the conditions, contingency. How often you are involved in this part?
I would actually, it's my preference to be involved usually right around the time the offer is submitted, for a few reasons. One, it's always great to have your team in place before you make an offer, because in New York City there is no deal that is binding upon the parties until both parties sign a mutually agreeable contract. So if you're slow and you haven't found your mortgage banker, if you're getting financing, if you haven't found your attorney, or anyone else on your team for that matter, you could jeopardize your transaction.
Yes.
So I like to be involved usually right before the offer. This way they have their team in place and go over some of the nuances of the offer. For instance, there are some buildings that we're aware of, and we may want to inform the client about that building from other due diligence matters that we've gone through. The other important factor, of course, is how to structure your deal. If you're telling me that...
So then we move to the next step, which is a deal sheet.
Yes.
Which also, usually I do it, but I understand that you are involved in this as well.
So when we do a lot of our brokerage seminars, we train the brokers to complete deal sheets efficiently. Okay. Because a lot of them are not efficient.
I know, yes.
And one of the things that you definitely need to understand as a buyer, and even when you represent a seller, is when you want to close. Yes. New York State, different from a lot of other states, and again, especially in New York City, a closing date is not a hard
So what I usually see in deal sheet when I receive them for other brokers would be as soon as possible.
TBD.
Yes, exactly. But is this something that you discuss before you going into contract, or something that you put in a contract?
It is recommended to have an agreed upon closing date, because you then avoid any sort of major issues. I have a deal that's going on right now where my buyer has to close on August 24th.
Okay.
And the seller is saying that they can't close before August 24th and may not be able to do August 24th.
I don't know if you remember, I had the same issue. I had to close before and they had to close. Okay.
So that could blow up a whole deal. And if that is first discussed during the contract phase, then it's a waste of time.
I think the closing deal, the closing date, it's one of the major issues. Let's say that it's a new construction and you can't really specify the date. Can you say like in 2018, or what can you do?
So that's an interesting point to raise, because in new construction or condo conversion projects, they typically have to close one unit in the whole building by a certain date, or everyone can back out. But once they close on one unit, then no matter how long it takes for your unit to be ready, you have to wait. Unless
Yes.
As you indicate, you negotiate what's called an outside closing date, which sets forth a date that they have to close title to your unit. Not every sponsor will agree to that. But going back to deal and term sheets, that's something you probably would want to raise before. And that's why I like to have a conversation with my client before an offer is made, because that might be something very important for them to buy.
Okay, but then before they really sign a contract, they have a deal sheet out, they agree to certain things, they can really back off, right? The contract is the first legal step that binding them to the deal.
Correct. And again, there is no binding deal unless there's a written agreement signed by both parties.
Which is contract. And who signed the contract first?
Typically the buyer signs the contract first, and commonly at that same time they put down 10%.
What if the seller changed his mind and he doesn't want to sell the property anymore?
There's typically no ramifications and everyone is in a bad mood.
Okay, but can they back off for whatever reason?
Yes, they can. I've had sellers instruct me, as much as I don't like to do it, send out literally multiple contracts to different buyers to see who signs first.
So a lot of buyers, they are saying that they want to buy condo, but they are not exactly sure why. What's the main difference between co-ops and condo?
One huge difference is getting approval to buy or sell in the unit. In condominiums, there is no application that requires the board of managers to approve or disapprove your application. So it gives an owner the right to sell at any point to whomever.
Okay.
Whereas in a co-op, you have to have, most commonly, boards will have to approve the buyer to become a shareholder of the corporation. Okay. And so that's a big difference. So condos are typically more expensive for that reason, that they have what's called the free alienability to sell or lease to any parties.
Okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad to buy a co-op. It also means that you know your neighbors, you know who lives in your building. Most likely the tenants are not changing all the time. Right,
and the big distinction is, if you're buying for investment, you should not be thinking for a co-op.
Yeah, because obviously you won't be able to rent it out.
Correct, and also typically the co-op board will not approve someone who's buying for investment purposes.
Yes. What else? The difference between co-ops
and
condos?
Another major distinction between the two is that a condo is more expensive to buy.
Yes.
There's title insurance.
But people think that when you're buying co-op, you don't really own it. I have a co-op and I feel like I own it.
You absolutely own it. You are just a shareholder in the corporation that has the right to occupy your apartment unit.
So what does it mean from day to day when you're living there? Does it make any difference?
From day to day, it doesn't make that much difference, other than you can't freely lease or sell your apartment.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, so another important factor is co-ops cost much less to acquire. There is no mortgage tax, there are no title insurance fees.
Which means the closing cost will be
much less.
Less. Okay.
Much less.
And then when you're talking about condo, we also should mention that when you're buying new construction, most likely the closing cost will be way higher.
Way higher
than resale.
Correct, because a lot of times when you buy new construction, the seller, because you're getting a new product and typically at a good price, will flip the seller paid taxes, typically transfer taxes, onto the buyer.
So just to let you know, whenever a buyer asking me about closing costs, I just always telling them, call Ross.
Yes, always a good, and that's why, again, I like to talk.
And it's not that I don't know.
No,
it's just
it's important.
Kind of
there are a lot of ins and outs, and that's another reason why, going back to our original point of our conversation, that I like to talk to buyers before making an offer, because then we can go over these estimated fees, so they don't have sticker shock.
And I know that usually you overestimate those fees, so they are not surprised.
Yes, and some buildings also have different types of transaction fees. Some have transfer fees paid by buyers. Some have transfer fees paid by sellers.
Can you negotiate this in a contract, in an offer?
Yes, everything is negotiable.
Yes.